Please welcome Izzy House, author and podcast host, Space Marketing.
How many of you believe that the glass is half empty? How many of you believe that the glass is half full? Well, I'm here to present a different reality today, that the glass is neither half empty or half full, but is completely full. It is half water and half air. How important are the contents to this glass? They bring life and meaning to the world. Marketing, too, is like this glass. There is part of this glass is what we recognize as marketing. The advertising that interrupts your programs and irritates you, trying to get you to buy the product that you do not want, that will probably break the first time you use it, represents this much. Most of the marketing is marketing that we want. And just like the air that comes from it, it is hardly noticeable, but dramatically impacts our actions. For example, what's your favorite team? How many of you have a dream car? Maybe it's a Porsche, a Ferrari. Oh wait, you look like an Audi person to me. Me? My dream car is a Prius. Yes, indeed. And that tells you a whole bunch about me. This particular conference is about marketing. You are surrounded by marketing. It's in the booths, it's in the sponsors, and we love it. We are inspired by it. Take away the marketing out of this conference, you would not have the booths, you would not have the little squishy astronauts that we all love, and you wouldn't have the sponsors, and you probably would not have a conference. It would not exist. Now, marketing makes you exist. When I first started my career, I was in what was called an environmental technology incubator. In this incubator were geniuses that created technology that could change and dramatically impact the world. There were geniuses that made electricity more efficient, that took and made landfills obsolete, or reused water that we just throw away. And most of those did not believe in marketing and never made it out of the incubator. Marketing makes you exist. It tells your story and it builds a relationship. So like the air, that's marketing, it is education, experience, and entertainment that we get that marketing from. One of the best case studies that we have is NASA. NASA made the space industry exist. Without their marketing efforts, we probably would not be in the careers that we're in today. They educated us and educated the American people about the Apollo program, introduced us to the space and the moon and rockets. They introduced us to the astronauts, the scientists, and the mission specialists. When it came time to go to the moon, we didn't watch them go. We went with them. The world went with them. And we continue to go with them. Even though it's decades away, we look at recordings and books and exhibits, and we get inspired and we go back with them. This is marketing, and it connects us on a deep level. Their marketing makes us say, I want to do that. In fact, that is what it made me say. When I was 13 years old, I went to the Kennedy Space Center. I'm sure most of us have all been there, and if not, they have a thing on Friday. I would definitely recommend going. Inspired me in high school. But then I went to a different career. I went to marketing. Years later, I went back to school, and about 5 years ago, I went back to the Kennedy Space Center. Now, I'm not going to give anything away, but I was standing at the Atlantis exhibit. And for those of you that have been, you know how powerful that is. And my heart is beating out of its chest. Tears are streaming down my eyes. As the crowd milled around me, it was at that moment that I realized that I could take my career of marketing and my love of space, and I could combine it. I could do it. And it was through that exhibit that made me realize that. Now, marketing tells our story and makes us do action. I got back and I dove right in, or else I would not be here. But it also creates action for our world. Take the contents of this glass, and now let's activate them. We have a climate crisis. We all know this. But not many people know that it's from space that we're able to see the solution. It's from space that we're able to determine weather and see what is happening. And the climate crisis is a real thing. And I'm going to tell you my story. I come from Kentucky, and within the last year or so, we have had two major climate crisis events. December, and I'm going to stress, December a year ago. So it's normally cold, right? It's normally snow. We had a 5-mile wide tornado rip through our state. It went 250 miles, taking out towns and houses. Completely wiped out Maysville off the map. 9 months later, we had what was comparable to a tsunami rip through our mountains and destroy homes. It took houses off of their foundations and left them on roads. Through both of these, over 100 people died and thousands lost their home. If it hadn't have been for space telling us that there was a climate crisis, it would have been deemed as freakish events. But the knowledge that we have from space tells us a different story. We need to do something about climate crisis, and Space Unlock has that key, and we need to let people know, and letting people know is marketing. So, like the contents of this glass, water and air breathe life into our planet and to us. Marketing, too, will bring life to your cause, your business, and your ideas. Tell your story and make the world a better place. Thank you. Yes?
Tell us about this podcast about space.
Okay, well, interesting thing, I wrote a book, and it's a primer on how to market, and it gives everybody, it takes you through the process. Well, during this time, I had a gentleman ask me to do one on spaceports, so it launched this month. It's Space Marketing Spaceports. During COVID, I had to get some interviews for this book, and nobody wants to do one more Zoom call, right? We're all zoomed out. And I was having a hard time getting some people to sit down with me on a Zoom call. So I created a podcast. And I was able to get all those interviews with a podcast. And the podcast itself is a vehicle for marketing. It's a vehicle for me. It's a vehicle for my guests. So that's how it was born. And now I interview guests and open up the world to what is available and who is available in space and what fabulous things they're doing. So another question. Yes? Well, initially I was using it for spaceports. So, because I believe that spaceports are the beginning of space. You know, and we need to have healthy spaceports so that we can have healthy space. If we have healthy space, then we have a healthy Earth. And that is how I view it. So spaceports are where space begins. So a lot of my podcasts in the beginning were geared towards spaceports and what worked, what didn't, and a lot of different questions. Then I have moved on to space industries, and like space tourism is a theme that I'm working on right now. I am going to be presenting at the Space Tourism Conference as well. So, and space industries. And there's just so many different industries that are related to space. I mean, I totally, it's my geek out part. I love learning about all of the different things that everybody is doing. So that's how I determine my guests. And if you want to be one, give me a call. Any other questions? It's very, very easy. It's Space Marketing Podcast, Space Marketing, period, or Space Marketing Spaceports. So there's a common theme here. And there was a slide up there that will take you right to my website that has the links for that. Izzy.house. So a lot of people have .com, but there's a .house, so it fit. I used it. Any other questions? All righty. Well, it has been a pleasure, and I will see you on the other side.
Please welcome Kevin Lantroop, Innovation Architect, Cyber Advisors.
Oh, howdy. Those are not the slides that we sent in this morning, so we'll figure it out. How's everybody doing today? Let's see what's going to come up. All right, well, my name's Kevin Lantroop. I work with startup companies and try to help companies figure out whether or not they have the ability to become a dual-use company. And I know that a lot of the DoD stuff that was supposed to be happening this week happened yesterday or happened over the last couple of days, but this talk really isn't for the folks who are experienced in competing for and deploying their technologies into military or government space. This is for the other companies. So a little bit about me. I have designed accelerators and academies and programs that help companies understand whether or not they have what it takes to be a dual-use company, to qualify, figure out what their use case is, who their customers are, and then try to take those companies to market and win their first big R&D contracts. I teach this process to startups through cohorts. We apply this process individually in representing companies. I also teach this to innovation programs at Naval Postgraduate School, Air University, and the University of Texas. And over the course of the last 5 years since the DoD innovation ecosystem has really grown up, we've touched about 500 companies in the process, either directly or through some sort of program. So what are we going to cover today? A little bit about what is the defense innovation ecosystem, what is it trying to accomplish, and what is, how does it function? What have we learned over the last 5 years, and particularly through repetitions and iterations with thousands of companies, 400 to 500 that I've personally had contact with, and really, what is dual use, and how does dual use play into this, and how can commercial space technologies leverage government requirements in order to determine whether they can be a dual use? And space is the ultimate dual use domain. So to start with, this is not a novel concept. Technology is changing warfare. Obviously, this program is really focused on DoD, but any dual-use technology area, and again, space being a big one, is going to fit. We have been admiring the problem of how to get innovative commercial technologies deployed into military contexts, into space, into those other spaces for several years. And we are kind of running out of time on how to figure this out. Mostly these types of programs are geared towards venture-backed companies, and you may be wondering why. Why all the focus on startups? Well, it's really about the money, the talent, and the technology. In 2021, $330 billion in private risk and growth capital was deployed inside the United States. The majority of that capital is being deployed towards companies and technologies that would fit within either the Air Force, Space Force, or the DoD science and technology strategy. And the most important thing is that that curve is going significantly up year after year. So there's a huge opportunity for the government to take advantage of these technologies. And that is what kind of prompted the emergence of a defense innovation ecosystem. Really in 2016, with the refactoring of the Defense Innovation Unit, at the time it was DIUX, into DIUX 2.0. And then in 2017 with AFWorks, 2018 with the activation of Army Futures Command in Austin. And now, of course, we have Space Force activated, we have SpaceWorks and all these other organizations. But over a course of about 2 years of kind of designing and deploying this ecosystem, and then another 2 to 3 years of running it and getting those repetitions of developing technology, we have learned a lot of lessons, and I'll cover some of those lessons today. All of these different innovation ecosystem cells that are focused on dual-use technology have some very common factors and goals that they are trying to accomplish or processes that they leverage. One of which is they're trying to attract startups. And the way that they do that is they have to connect to the technology ecosystem or the innovation base in a different way. And so how are they doing that? Well, they're going to places like Silicon Valley, and they're going to Boston. They're going off of military installations outside of traditional military communities. They're embedding in places like the Capitol Factory in Austin, Texas, which is a place where I've done most of my work over the last 5 years. They're trying to make programs more open, more collaborative, and more accessible to a different type of company, to a non-traditional company. And that means simpler proposals, faster contracting, faster payment, and most importantly for most of the companies that we talk to, flexible intellectual property terms, whether you're talking about SBIR IP rights, or you're talking about truly flexible and negotiable IP through another transaction. Applying an iterative and lean product development process, which means rapid iterations, tons of customer discovery. The different organizations, I think, have varying levels of success in doing this, but this is certainly a goal for all of them. And then finally, the big thing we're all still trying to figure out is how do we transition these technologies developed in the innovation space over to the acquisition space. So over the course of, again, 5+ years of running this, thousands of iterations, we have learned a couple of, I think, really core key concepts. One of which is 20,000 solution providers are better than 20. That is a really kind of those numbers are kind of notional. But the idea is that we want to be able to access the entire innovation base, not just the top 20 companies that are typically pulling between 50 and 75% of the DoD R&D budget. Key concept 2, we don't want to turn technology startups into defense industry companies, and I'll go into that in a little bit more detail. And number 3, the defense innovation system and the defense acquisition system have to be able to work together, because that is the key to transitioning these programs. All of the money that exists to field and sustain the types of technologies that we need to remain dominant in the space domain, in the maritime domain, those all require to be funded and maintained by programs of record. So the innovation system has to be able to connect to that. All of those iterations, and this is where the slide deck is differing from what we put in here, but that's okay. All of these different iterations have resulted in a process. This is a process that I teach, that I like to apply, called the Material Innovation Pipeline. Anybody going to South by Southwest in a few weeks in Austin? Anybody been to South by Southwest or heard of it? Yeah. So South by Southwest is a very, very traditional kind of funnel fill event for these types of companies that we want to try to connect to and bring into the material innovation pipeline. But that's where you've got a bunch of companies, a bunch of people with really innovative ideas, people that do research, and they're trying to understand what are the Department of Defense's problems, what are NASA's problems. Does my company qualify to do business with these organizations? Is my company going to be competitive to do business with these types of organizations? What are the use cases that I can deliver that are going to create value for these customers and organizations? And then who are the people that I need to connect to? Because the companies that are coming into this funnel don't really know how to do, most of them don't even have a cage code. If you don't have a cage code, you can't submit a proposal to do business with the DoD. So they need help. They need folks to help them figure this out. The second thing is developing a very, very detailed and aligned use case. And this actually aligns really well with not turning not turning emerging tech companies, startups, into defense industry companies. And I'll go over that one a little bit better. And then ultimately, you've got to do business development. If these companies don't do business development, they won't ultimately win a contract, and then they're never going to be able to adapt, test, and deliver their solution to a DoD customer. There's product strategy and things associated with how you do prototyping that I think is very important. A lot of these comments are probably way too in-depth for this, but if you go to graylinegroup.com on the homepage, you'll see a link to about a 20,000-word thesis. So if you have trouble sleeping tonight, or you want to learn more about the how to execute the prototyping strategy in a way that doesn't break your company, you can go look into that. And then the culmination of kind of the first half of the material innovation pipeline, which are those 5 steps we've gotten very, very good at over the last handful of years, it really ends with delivering, demonstrating, testing that prototype, and validating that it works for the customer in their operational environment. On the other side of the valley of death, we have the things that matter to create mission impact, to actually get your system fielded, which is integrating into the workflows, the IT networks, the major systems that your technology supports, scaling it up so that it touches across the entire user base, and then getting it deployed, which usually means through contracting. Already covered that one, so I'm going to skip it. I do want to go into a little more depth, because this is one of the areas where I see a lot of early stage companies really struggle. I work with a company, and we win 1 or 2 what I would consider to be like a phase 2 prototyping contract. We're talking somewhere in the range of $1 million to $3 million. And for a company that's raised, a $2 to $5 million seed round, or maybe a $5 to $10 million Series A, that's a significant chunk of money. That's the biggest money they've ever gotten from a customer, right? That's the biggest money they've ever gotten from anybody, from anything that's not an investor. And so they are very excited, and they really want to try to do the one. They want to do really well on that product, but then they want to do it again and again and again. And that is a terrible idea for your company. If you tell your investors you're going to do that, I certainly hope they walk away from you, because that is not what they're investing in. Your investors are investing in a commercial market capture strategy that's going to start with a little wedge in your entry market. Your first customers, you're going to validate your MVP, validate your delivery model, your pricing, all of those things, and then you want to raise more capital because you want to scale into that market, right? So what do you do with the DoD money? Well, the way to do this in a way that if you're a Series Seed company and you want to be an A, or you're a Series A company and you want to be a B, the way to do that doesn't make your investors run away from you is to keep that DoD derivative product as closely aligned to your commercial product roadmap and your commercial go-to-market strategy as you possibly can, because you want to leverage that money to advance your commercial technology, not use that 18-month period of performance and scope of work as a way to delay the progress of your commercial company by 18 months. And there are a lot more details about like how do you staff that project and those kinds of things that need to be addressed as well. So as I mentioned, space is the ultimate dual-use domain. The biggest kind of comprehensive project or program, at least that our companies are touching right now, is the OSAM or ISAM, which is being run through SpaceWorks Orbital Prime. And this is this idea that, for decades we've been launching more and more and more things into the lower useful levels of space. It's getting crowded up there as the space domain gets more accessible to commercial companies, as satellites get smaller and more numerous, as the pace of technology increases. There's just going to be more and more and more stuff up there, and eventually we're going to have a big old traffic jam in space. So we got to figure out a way to solve for that. and it's inherently dual use because the space layer is just as, it's primarily enabling commercial technologies to exist, but the military, or at least the government, states are the ones that have to police that. There are a couple of examples that I'll show you of companies that we have worked with who have really interesting technologies that are being funded through ISAM program and that have really immense commercial space applications that are, to help us declutter the space layer. One is a company called Transastra. They are here this week. They have the only space asset capturing technology that fully conceals without any kind of debris, and this is where I'm not a space technologist. This is a really interesting concept. From a space vehicle, deploy a bag that can wrap around a small satellite, fully contain it, and then either drag it out into an outer layer where it gets out of the way, or allow it to re-enter back into the atmosphere and burn up. Very interesting technology, and this company has recently received a couple of significant awards that are going to advance their commercial product. Another company, Outpost. Outpost is here in the room today. Good to see you guys. This is a super, super, super interesting technology that has the potential to completely actually change the whole concept of how we do ISAM. Instead of launching robots into space that intercept vehicles or perform robotic maintenance, automated maintenance on them to extend their useful life, what if we just create a way to get to and from space much, much cheaper and much, much faster, right? So we're all probably aware there are companies that are working on the launch aspect of that, using kinetic energy, using other types of energy to get out, past that 10-mile range where you can get into space with a much, much, much smaller rocket, much less fuel. Well, this is the return solution for that. An inflatable, thermally shielded shroud that can inflate during reentry, significantly slow the coefficient, or significantly increase the coefficient of friction and slow the reentry velocity so that you can then deploy a glider wing. And the glider wing doesn't get ripped off because the vehicle's going so fast. And then you can steer that vehicle to it very precisely with very little added weight, no added fuel. So a super, super interesting technology. And with that, that's the last slide that I have. I would love to connect with any small businesses that want to explore these pathways, or if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to take those. I think we probably have a few minutes.
Can you elaborate on what typically happens to companies that get caught in that valley of death?
Yeah, so the valley of death really is about, from the military context, or from a DoD, government funding context, is the project that you're funded to do, the prototype you're funded to develop for the government, going to actually transition and get into the acquisition side, where it's going to be bought, sustained, and used by Space Force or by whomever. And so my answer to that question is, organize your prototyping effort so that it doesn't matter whether you don't get across the valley of death, right? You want to make sure if you align your military, your DoD funding opportunity and prototyping efforts with your commercial product roadmap, that it's additive to your commercial product roadmap. My opinion, there are probably folks in this room and in this building right now that would argue with me about this. We can have a beer and talk about it. We haven't really figured out how to transition technology from non-traditional companies just yet. I think that we've come a long way over the first 5 years. We're going to come a lot further over the next 5 years. But my advice to a company that is, say an A or a B round company that wants to do this is we got to stay focused and aligned with your product roadmap. And then it doesn't matter if you don't get to the valley of death, because you're still going to get that really cool logo to show your investors, and you're going to be able to offset roughly a third of your early investment rounds with non-dilutive capital.
How would you rate the current mechanisms that the Department of Defense has to onboard commercial space companies? We mentioned SpaceWorks, but for all the things, how would you rate how they're doing, and what recommendations would you have for the Department of Defense to be able to take advantage of more commercial innovation?
Yeah, so it depends on what you're talking about, what you mean by onboard, your question really is about why the pipeline is, to me, an interesting way to visualize this. So those first 5 steps, which is a company that either has a brand new shiny cage code and gets all the way to prototyping, funded by the DoD, I think we're super good at doing that. AFWorks is going to award, between, we'll say Department of the Air Force, which includes Air Force, Space Force, going to award 150, 160 phase 2 contracts this year. They're going to award another I don't know, 200 million in TAC-FI, STRAT-FI awards to transition. That's just out of SBIR. Very, very, very few of those technologies are going to make it into programs of record based on the current systems we have, because there's no pathways that tie the Defense Innovation System, all those innovation programs, to programs of record. Or at least we don't have enough reps of that we can say we know how it works. So my recommendation is to incentivize system program offices to integrate external technology funded by DoD innovation programs. And I think we're going to start to see that. The Army announced at AUSA last year that they were going to start using inclusion of an innovation-funded technology from a non-traditional company as technical merit evaluation criteria for their major programs. Within the SBIR reauthorization statute from last year, we're starting to see more reporting requirements to show these transitions. So I think it's something, again, that we'll get to. But if I had to evaluate and grade the system as it exists today, on that part of it, the grade would not be something that I would reward my daughter for if she came home from school with that report card. I think we're probably out of time. Thank you so much. If anybody wants to connect with me, I'll be walking around. But it's very good to be able to speak to you all today.